Story 1. The fact that I will die eventually. Nature will take care of things. That thought really saved me. I might as well give this shot at life my all because it will end regardless. Story 2. My family would be devastated. I have watched body camera videos of parents reacting to their child dying. Their screams and cries are haunting. I do not want to cause my family any pain. Story 3. My dad and stepmom have already lost one biological child each to suicide. I do not want to add myself to that list. Story 4. Incompetence is why I failed my attempt. I had such a terrible time in inpatient care that it has stopped me from trying again. Even when I'm at my lowest, I tell myself, if you mess it up, you have to go back to that place. Since no method is foolproof, there's no chance I'll attempt again. Remember, it may be difficult now, but trying and failing to end it will only make things worse. Story 5. The mirror. I was sitting on the end of my bed, put the gun next to my temple, and lifted my head up. I saw my reflection and just paused for about 10 seconds, thinking, what in the world? Though the wounds run deep, it's better this way. Story 6. My sister died in a car accident. I had been dealing with severe thoughts of self-harm for months, in therapy and on medication, but the overwhelming desire to end my life to escape depression was ever present. Driving felt like playing Russian roulette because the intense urge to drive off the road and into a tree or river was relentless. My sister died in a tragic accident after falling out of the bed of a truck her boyfriend was driving, leaving behind two young children who witnessed her fall and the traumatic brain injury that led to her death after a week in the intensive care unit. Seeing firsthand how her death affected my family, especially my mother, made me realize that I could never willingly choose to inflict that kind of pain on my loved ones. I committed to more counseling and continued medication. I haven't had thoughts or urges to harm myself since then, back in 2008. Story 7. I told myself, you can't die because you haven't lived yet. You've just existed so far. You're as good as dead anyway. When you do go after living. Story 8. When my dog died, I didn't realize how much impact a life can have on loved ones until that moment. She brought everyone joy. Who's to say I can't do the same? Story 9. At my lowest moment, I called the suicide hotline, and they put me on hold for about an hour. I found it morbidly funny and decided to stick around to see what other amusing experiences I might encounter. I became somewhat cynical for a while, but here we are, 7 years later, and I'm very glad to be alive. Story 10. In 2020, I became independent before COVID-19, and my father gave me my lifelong pet. I fell into a severe post-pandemic depression and lost my job while trying to pay my bills. I was struggling severely. I was losing weight and hair, couldn't sleep, and had just broken up with an abusive partner. I tried to take all my clonazepam and other pills I had with alcohol. Then I saw my dog wagging her tail. I couldn't do that to her. She only had me. I vomited as much as I could and fell asleep. Thanks to my beautiful dog, who was there for me during those difficult times. Thank you. May she rest in peace. She got to know my husband and lived with us for a while. Story 11. Poor quality control. I put a .45 caliber pistol with a hollow point bullet to my head and pulled the trigger. Due to a manufacturing glitch, the primer did not have powder in it, so the round did not fire. Story 12. I have never tried or thought about it, but I wanted to see what people were writing. For those who feel weak or lack courage, you have it backward. There is nothing courageous or strong about taking your own life. It takes strength and courage to fight through the issues that lead to thoughts of self-harm and to choose to live. Give yourself credit for being strong and courageous enough to push forward. Story 13. The first time I considered it, I was standing on the ledge of a building with numerous health issues. The realization struck me that I was at rock bottom in life and could either die or get better, so I stepped off and returned to my hospital room. The second time was another very low point. I was actually comforted by having a bottle of vodka and opioids by my bed. It seemed like a way out. I look back on that now and am still stunned that my mind was in such a place. I realized then that my life had drastically improved once. It makes sense that it could happen again. The third time I was heavily contemplating it, The thought that it didn't feel like me to have those thoughts again kept me from going through with it. I eventually discovered that my pain medication gabapentin was known to cause suicidal thoughts in some patients. Once I stopped taking it, I returned to normal. Story 14. My son is a blessing in my life. If I had not had him at 18, I don't know where I would be today. I love him more than anything on this planet. He is almost 14 now and is turning into a wonderful young man, thinking about his future and how he can be successful. I got lucky with him. He has saved me. Story 15. Have you seen the price of funeral plots? I would rather stay and pay rent for another month than deal with that expense. Story 16. I made a promise to my partner that I would never put him through that. On the worst days, it's the one thing that keeps me safe. I do not break my promises and certainly will not break the ones I make to him. Story 17. The first time my younger sister walked in on me, she was young and I don't think she truly understood what she was seeing, but I felt so guilty. Now, having lost many loved ones to suicide and other sudden deaths, I just don't want to put my family through that again. It was hard enough for them when my late partner passed away. I can't bear to put them through something similar with me. Story 18. I got out of retail. It's not a joke. I was a supervisor at a local drugstore, and people can be incredibly difficult. You're often not seen as human by the corporation or the customers. You're constantly being yelled at by individuals struggling with addiction about how you're stealing their medication or how they understand it was a month's supply but they ran out and needed immediately. We were held hostage once by a man with a shotgun because he had an argument with some teenagers in the parking lot. The daily beratement over the most minor issues was overwhelming. I had a customer who wanted to fight because I refused to give him a refund on an empty package. I came up with a plan. I was going to go out one day on a hike and harm myself. I had planned to do it from inside my pocket after throwing myself off a small hill to make it look like my knife had opened accidentally, hoping my family could collect my life insurance. I had decided that if I was still working there after a certain amount of time, I would go through with it. Luckily, I landed my dream job and didn't look back. In summary, retail is challenging, but it's not the worker's fault. Be kind. Story 19. I suffered too much for it to end that way. Just thinking about ending my life brings me rage. I see it as the worst decision, and people who struggle with these thoughts should definitely reach out to others, say screw you to their fears, and keep on trying every available tool at their disposal. Every situation in this world has a solution or a way to resolve it. It might take time and effort, but it is still better than giving up. Ending your life is the worst thing that can happen. Anything before that isn't so bad in comparison. Story 20. My dog was my anchor during a difficult time. I lost my cousin to suicide, which plunged me into a dark place. While I was in college, none of my peers or professors seemed to care. I was unknowingly in a terrible and emotionally abusive relationship, and my partner showed no concern for my well-being. Witnessing the impact of my cousin's death on my family should have motivated me to stay strong, but I thought they would understand what I was going through. My dog, however, remained unaware of my struggles and would be waiting indefinitely for me to return. As challenging as it was, my dog was the one reason that kept me going. I still have her. She was at my wedding. She has been there for me through both the worst and best times of my life. Story 21. I always had things that I enjoyed doing and things to look forward to. Many of the things I looked forward to are gone now, but I am hanging in. Story 22. I was concerned that my parents would blame themselves and that my brother would be left alone with them if they split up and became even angrier than they already were. I was 10 at the time. Story 23. It would break my mother. She doesn't have to lose another son in her lifetime. I won't lie, though. The note is written, and I am just coasting through life at this point. Story 24. Possibly the one-time depression helped. I just couldn't be bothered. I saw no hope in anything. I felt like there was no point in going on. But ending my life took more effort than I could muster for anything in that moment. So I lay there in bed, staring at the ceiling, and did nothing. After a while, I had a little upswing, managed to get out of bed, and things seemed a little brighter. I then dropped out of university and moved back home. Story 25. The song Lightning Crashes by Liv came on the radio, and I wanted to hear it one last time. By the time it was over, I realized there was so much to live for. Story 26. Post-traumatic stress disorder from Desert Storm and poor life choices led me to attempt suicide twice. As a survivor, I tried using a chain and a pipe in the basement ceiling, but it felt like my head was going to explode, so I managed to undo the chain. A few years later, I woke up in the intensive care unit in 4-point restraints after overdosing on 37 Xanax bars and a 12-pack of beer. I'm about 10 years sober now and doing a little better these days. Story 27. In my high school friend group, there was one unusual person who you weren't quite sure why you were friends with, but they were just there. This person once said, very late at night when the conversation turned serious, that suicide is the most selfish thing a person can do, and they talked about it as though it were the ultimate sin. That stuck with me because no matter how bad things were, suicide would be viewed as a selfish act. Story 28. My parents care but do not show it, and I am becoming resentful of living in pain to spare someone else. They also ignored what happened while my brother and I were molested. The request may be too much. Story 29. I was struggling with postpartum depression deeply. I began to think my son would be better off growing up without a miserable soul like me. One day, while watching the show Teen Mom, one of the girls, Jade, talked about how her biological father committed suicide when she was about 6 months old. The memory of that scene is a bit vague now, but I remember her saying something about her dad not loving her enough to stay. Strangely enough, that affected me. I watched her open up about the topic and felt emotional, thinking, I cannot leave my son with these same feelings. It motivated me to improve my mental health. So thank you, Jade, for sharing that. Story 30. If I ended my life, it would be over. Right now, I feel like I have no quality of life, which is terrible, but I believe being dead would be even worse. Story 31. I am scared of the pain it will cause me and others. I often hear about the instant regret from survivors. At one point, I worry about my dog finding me or being unsure why I am not there, and that affects me deeply. I also think about my friends who know how bad I am and blame themselves, even though they did their best. Then there's my ex, who would never forgive herself for not saving me, even if she did. Story 32. It didn't work, and no one ever noticed that I even tried, even though I was throwing up for a day or two and couldn't get out of bed. Story 33. There are people who wish for my absence, and I dislike them intensely. I have to live as long as possible, either to outlive them or to be a thorn in their side for the remainder of my time. Nothing fuels me more than spite and pettiness. Story 34. I decided to check if anyone finally answered me that night. At the perfect moment, my best friend did. No doubt I would be dead if it weren't for him. Story 35. Knowing my luck, the last thing I would see before losing consciousness would be my lottery numbers on the television. It is always worth taking a chance on one more day. Story 36. When I tried to think of a plan, I couldn't find a way to do it that wouldn't potentially hurt someone else. If I harmed myself at home, my housemate or landlord might discover me and have to live with the knowledge that it happened in their home. If I jumped in front of a train or vehicle, the driver would have to deal with the aftermath. I considered finding somewhere quiet in the woods, but I worried that a child might discover me. I never wanted to deal with water, as I hate the idea of drowning. I am really thankful I didn't go through with it because life can and does get better if you give it time and make the effort. Story 37. I couldn't leave knowing my disabled daughter would be left with her father. I have a strong feeling he would place her in a home as soon as possible. Not to mention, he just cut off all her hair against my wishes, and she couldn't object. I can't leave her with that. Story 38. Honestly, my dad's letters hold so much meaning. After he took his own life, I was in a really dark place for a long time. There were moments when I thought about following the same path. But then I remembered those letters he wrote for me. Letters for my future birthdays, my wedding day, and all the milestones he knew he wouldn't be there for. I realized that if I ended things, I would never get to open those letters when they were meant to be opened. I would never know what wisdom, jokes, or stories he wanted to share with my future self. Felt like I would be breaking a promise to him. So I keep going. Some days are harder than others, but I have my writing, my games, and my work. Life is messy and painful sometimes, but I am curious to see where my story goes next. Story 39. Imagining my partner and family finding me, or knowing that my dogs would not understand why I disappeared. Story 40. My dog, the old girl, always stares at me, which makes me smile until I stop thinking about it. Story 41. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. I was able to overcome depression with help from my husband and my therapist. My younger sister took her life just over 9 months ago, and I could never do that to my parents, my husband, or my friends. Sadly, I can understand the desire to end the pain, but for all the above reasons, it's not a choice I could make. Story 42. Fear and a friend called an ambulance for me, which led to an inpatient stay. It was not a threatening or manipulative situation. I was genuinely discussing my feelings, and my friend became really worried. The stay did not help at all, but I appreciate her concern. Story 43. A cat wanted to go outside. I chose to comply so he wouldn't see what was about to happen. Those seconds were all it took for my mind to reconsider its decision. Story 44. The thought of my parents always crosses my mind. I often imagine what life would be like for them after I'm gone. And honestly, that is not something I want to put them or anyone else through. Now, I have a niece who loves me, giving me even more reasons to live. Story 45. It's not that I don't like living. I just hate society and generally don't like people. I can't stand the arrogance and the mentality of being better than others. I dislike hookup culture. It has ruined the desire to love another person, and it is disheartening that seeking simple respect is seen as toxic masculinity. I resent how women can commit domestic violence and abuse without consequence, and it has become a social norm. I love my children, and passing such behavior onto them is not how to solve a problem. We need to teach them to be better while I suffer in silence. I find peace in nature and in the love of animals. My dog is the only being that will ever love me for who I am and be by my side until my last day. Instead of facing death, if I am pushed to that point, I would gather what I need and live deep in the wilderness. There are many good locations across the country. Although it would require a lot of effort, at least I could find some inner peace before making a choice that can't be undone. Story 46. I realized that the world cannot break me, and my survival is the greatest response to everything that tried. Story 47. As much as I didn't believe it a few years ago, people needed me. My mother needed me, especially during her divorce. My younger sibling needed someone to guide them. My grandparents would have been devastated at losing their grandchild before they passed away. My dog needed someone to cuddle and be affectionate with, especially since they are so old. I didn't have good friends before I turned 20. Maybe 1 or 2 were good, but I felt like a burden to everyone. I realized my death would have devastated my entire family and traumatized my sibling, mother, and dog for the rest of their lives. I'm important to them, and that was enough to get me the help I needed. I ended up meeting my fiancée at 21. Story 48. 1. Thinking about the aftermath regarding my family, the thought of a failed attempt at suicide fills me with dread. I imagine being bedridden forever, connected to tubes for feeding and waste elimination. At some point, I felt that I should focus my efforts on seeking a form of sweet revenge. Story 49. I read that suicide doesn't end the pain. It passes it on to those who love you, and I agree. Grief is devastating, and I'm not going to make my loved ones go through it by my own hands. Besides, things might get better. Who knows? Story 50. Honestly, my boyfriend, I've struggled a lot with my mental health due to my mother and my social life, but my boyfriend was there for me every step of the way. I will never forget him for that. The number of times I contemplated it, considered taking that step, and ultimately stopped was all because of my boyfriend. It's amazing how love works. Story 51. A friend of mine went through it and had to attend his funeral while planning my own way out. My mother is the last surviving member of my family. There is a strange comfort in metal music, reminding me that I am not suffering alone. Story 52. Which time? The primary reason has been that my parents wouldn't take it well. I also have a cat whose medical costs are too high for my parents to cover. It's my parents' fault that I existed in the first place and that I'm still alive. Story 53. My pets. I cannot imagine the kind of challenges they might face if I were to pass away. They are my beloved companions, and no one will harm them. Story 54. Because I did it. I successfully overdosed and was clinically dead for a little under 3 minutes. However, I had some healthcare workers defy their orders and the time of the call, and I was brought back. After a successful suicide attempt and a successful revival, I decided that it would be more trouble to do it again than to try to find whatever happiness I can in this life. Story 55. The thought that someone is going to have to find me and clean up after me worries me. I own too much stuff right now, and it would be overwhelming for someone to handle that. Additionally, there are still dogs I have yet to meet. Story 56. I thought about who would have to clean up the mess. That might be a subconscious plea from my mind to stop considering the task. But to be fair, it was my mind that prompted me to think about it in the first place. If anyone is curious, the part of your mind that suggests it is a good idea may not have your best interests at heart. Story 57. I'm not depressed now, but I made an attempt about 6 years ago. I realized that enduring the pain of living was better than my parents enduring the pain of losing a child. Thankfully, I have a great life now. Story 58. When I was young, I used to poke at my wrist with a pin until I bled, and I became numb inside. Things changed when I made a friend who taught me how to use my intelligence and biting humor to fight back against male bullies at school. I learned to observe and find their weaknesses and then launch sarcastic insults back at them when they tried to target me. I had been an easy target before because I was insecure about my looks, but I was smart and patient, and I learned to become tougher. The thing I am most grateful for is that toughness never destroyed my propensity to nurture others. Once I got to university, the whole world opened up, and I didn't need to be so hard anymore. Now, my wit and abilities with verbal repartee delight my lawyer husband of 30 years, and my nurturing nature has helped my adult children navigate difficult times, as well as the hundreds of other young people I helped. My class was open early and late for my students, and at lunch for kids who wanted to work on school assignments while they ate in a quieter environment where the teacher had a tough reputation. Story 59. Prozac. My post-traumatic stress disorder and obsessive-compulsive disorder were so severe that I felt I couldn't live under constant anxiety. I was always on edge and afraid. I didn't want to live like that anymore. Story 60. I didn't want to be remembered as a failure who took the easy way out, and I didn't want to hurt anyone. Story 61. I tried 6 times by the time I was 27. A friend said I would never make it to 30 if I continued the way I was, with many substances and self-harm moments. My mind just said, I will make it to 30. I am 34 in a couple of months. So spite, I'd say. But is it good spite? Story 62. A safety. The Winchester 30-30 has a safety built into the stock. You have to squeeze the lever to shoot it. I forgot and pulled the trigger with no bang, startled myself, and threw the gun to the other side of the room. I went and got help. Story 63. 2 years ago, when I was attempting to take my life, I saw an old man near me on the bridge, just staring into the trees with an almost blissful smile. He turned and waved, and it kind of broke me. All it did was remind me that people are good and life gets better. I left and went home, where I would go to the hospital for an inpatient stay. Story 64. Failing. A friend interrupted me partway through, then refused to leave my house for 3 days until he was sure I wasn't going to. I have a child now. I really want her life to be better, and taking myself out pretty much ruins that. Story 65. I actually tried and failed, but now that time has gone by, I still have those thoughts. I realize I don't want to go to hell, and I have a baby on the way. Getting closer to God made me realize it's not always going to be like this. Things will get better. Story 66. My pets. I never really thought about what would happen to them if something happened to me until I saw the grief my cat went through after one of my other cats passed away. I still think about it sometimes, but I would never be able to leave them behind after considering their well-being. Story 67. I couldn't put my brother through losing me. Sometimes all it takes to save a life is one person caring. Story 68. I wasn't dressed the way I wanted to be when I was found. If I'm gonna die, I want to do it in style, or at least not in mismatched lingerie, a dirty t-shirt and ripped tights. It may sound silly, but it saved me. Story 69. I feel bad for my cat, who is just left there meowing and wondering why I am not moving. I have an extremely clingy SPHWNX who cannot handle it when I leave to do laundry. She screams at the door until I come back. It would be unkind to leave her alone until my fiancé gets home and discovers everything. Story 70. I prayed and asked Jesus to take the depression away from me, and I felt it leave my body like a vacuum pulling out from the top of my head. I do not know. Jesus Christ has saved my life more than once. That is for sure. Story 71. Latest, it was simply someone else beating me to it. I had been spiraling for 5 years mentally. I was losing hope in myself, seeing how I was not able to be the father I wanted to be, realizing more and more that I simply had no tools or inspiration on how to handle my children's emotions. When I spiraled, I was also forced to be weak, which led to an identity crisis since I was used to being the strong one, always caring for others and bearing their pain. But when I hit rock bottom, I failed to bear it. I had many thoughts about my family being better off without me. I believed they would benefit more from life insurance than having me around, and I did not feel like myself or feel loved or wanted by anyone. I felt like I was walking on the edge of a black void, just waiting for that final push to fall and let the darkness catch me. Then my sister's husband took his own life. I was at their house the day after his suicide, sat with their 3 children, ages 8, 10, and 12, listened to their pain, answered the questions I could, and let them express their feelings. We shared memories, talked about whether he thought of them before his death, and discussed grief and how we all felt he would simply walk through the door at any moment. We talked about how he could ever think this was better for them, how he could believe they did not love him. We discussed that every emotion is valid, even happiness. Completely broke me. I sat there for 4 hours just holding those kids, answering the questions that were swirling in my mind about my own family. As I left their house, I was shaking. I decided that I either needed to get help now or I was not going to make it, and I could not force my own family and kids to go through that. So I reached out to any available support and received amazing help. It has been a bit over 6 months, and I am not on the edge anymore. I am okay, but kind of waiting for the next bombshell. I just hope that we will all survive and that we may one day see a quieter life. Story 72. My family also feared that I wouldn't be successful, that something would go wrong, and I would be trapped in a body that didn't work, have brain damage, or be in a vegetative state. Story 73. Realizing that many people in my life have some form of mental health issue, we talk to each other about our feelings. Over the last 2 years, I have found that I have many people I can call and talk to when I am feeling off. Story 74. I realized that the reason I felt so bad was that I had the wrong people around me. After I removed them, life immediately started to feel better. Story 75. I work in childcare and education with younger kids. Each time I get close, I think about how difficult it would be for a parent of one of my nanny kids or preschoolers to explain what suicide is and why people do it. I couldn't bear the thought of how much love they feel from me being fake or how it could alter their relationships with others in the future. So I don't. Story 76. I often think about how devastated my family would be if they found me, especially my younger siblings. Now, I have a cat and a dog, so I always have someone to care for and someone I can't let down during my low moments. It's important to remember that there are many people who will be affected by your loss, not just those you can readily think of. There are always more people than you realize who will be impacted by it. Story 77. I spent a lot of time saying, I can't undo it. I'll do it tomorrow. Life felt easier if I knew I could be done tomorrow. I procrastinated myself into living. Story 78. Eldest daughter, siblings, and I were already going through enough. I couldn't add that to them as well. Story 79. My husband took me to the hospital where my stomach was pumped. I'm so thankful for him. That was about 20 years ago. Life is much better now. thanks to therapy and medication. Story 80. I was in the moment of surrender. Being tribal, I thought there had to be another way. I fell asleep in water during meditation and had a vision where I received my spirit animal and underwent scarification. It was a complete rebirth for me. Now, I spend as much time as I can in nature. I also went skydiving, which provided a hard reset for my soul and greatly benefited my mental health. Story 81. A good therapist and transitioning. I am a transgender woman. My wife did not want me to transition, at least not medically. I was drinking heavily. My therapist said, "We will get more done without that." To which I replied, "Fine, Tammy, fine." Once I got sober, I made a commitment to myself, got my first tattoo, started hormone therapy, found an apartment, and filed for divorce. Story 82. Family and the promises I've made include a fear that if I don't see this life through naturally until my time is up, I will be brought back and forced to experience it all over again under unknown circumstances. Story 83. I began to black out during the first cut and started shaking so intensely that I couldn't continue. That's all. Story 84. My best friend did it, and I could not leave that kind of trauma behind, knowing how it feels on the other side. Story 85. One of my good friends committed suicide. What a terrible feeling that is. The questions will forever remain, searching for some explanation as to why. Knowing that same feeling will overcome my immediate family and friends is what stopped me from doing it. I feel terrible for those who have no friends or family. It must be incredibly difficult. You also have to learn how to love yourself. We have very little control over this thing called life. Rolling with the punches will get you far, and finding that inner peace is tough but very worthwhile. I overcame depression, life started to get better, and I'm still here. As long as there is fresh air to breathe and I'm not 6 feet under, life can always be much worse than it is now. I like to believe there are brighter days for all of us. Hold on to that faith. Story 86. The infinite conscious awareness that resides within me and all beings pierces through suffering each time. Story 87. My oldest brother survived a suicide attempt over Christmas when I was 14. I had no idea he was struggling. The bittersweet part was that it was the first time I had a family member to talk to about these thoughts. He is now happily married and teaches art to children. Story 88. The act of actually doing it is a whole ordeal I have to go through, and if I fail one more time and have to wake up to a new day anyway, I am going to absolutely lose it. Story 89. I didn't swallow enough pills. I'm glad I didn't, though, because everything I thought wouldn't get solved turned out all right a couple of months after my attempt. Story 90. Suicide in Me is a short documentary about suicide survivors, something that no one contemplating suicide thinks will happen. Without giving too much away, it is very moving and well worth your time to watch. Story 91. I honestly don't know. I've been behaving dangerously with drugs for years, so it's amazing that I'm still alive and sane. The amounts and combinations of drugs I've taken at various times could have easily killed me on many occasions. That was never my intention. I have gone on with a distinct lack of care and mindfulness about my actions, so some part of me always knew that I was doing something dangerous. I'm working on it, and I've made significant progress on the path to recovery, yet I have still taken dangerous amounts and combinations of drugs as recently as this past Sunday. Uncovering the underlying issues that cause me to act in these ways is a long and arduous process, but it's important and worth it, and I could not go through this alone. Thankfully, I am finally realizing that I don't have to, and I've found a supportive and caring community that tells me like it is, cares about responsible drug use, and shares similar interests with me. People I connect with in a way that I've longed to be around for years. In summary, I don't know, but perhaps good karma will come my way. Story 92. I couldn't find a painless death when I was 16. Now, being much older, I have found it, but I have things to live for, so I don't need it. Story 93. My dad took his life when I was 17. I remember how that felt and how it affected my family. I cannot put them through that again. Additionally, I have many goals. I cannot give up now. I am much better than I used to be. I just have to keep up with work and therapy. Story 94. Essentially, it was like a roll of the dice. In February, while I was walking home from work, I crossed a bridge over a frozen river. I knew that part of the river was relatively deep and had a strong current, leading to relatively thin ice. In other words, if you fell through, you wouldn't be able to get up from the same hole. As I was crossing the bridge, it struck me. I walked onto the ice in the middle of the river and began jumping. The ice cracked and creaked, but after 10 to 15 jumps, it held. The next morning, I visited a therapist, and a few hours later, I found myself in a mental health ward for 2 months. Story 95. Fear of dying. The process is eerie to me, and I'm not going to deny that I am scared of it. Life is difficult, but not enough for me to contemplate that yet. However, if I could just sleep and not wake up, that would be nice. Story 96. My friends, family, and my dog. After years of depression, I finally felt loved. I found new friends who accept and love me for who I am. After talking with many people, I decided to go into therapy again. I behaved poorly in my early teens and thought I was useless, feeling like I threw my life away. Narcissistic, arrogant, and aggressive. After a long time, I did a complete turnaround and became a whole new person, the person I always wanted to be but never could. My loved ones care for me. My dog is always excited to see me and lays in bed when I have a setback until I feel better. Healthy relationships with loved ones are essential for mental health, in my opinion. One thing I learned in therapy is that you should strive to be someone you would love and behave accordingly. Self-perception is crucial for mental health as well. Story 97. There are numerous near-death experiences that describe people who commit suicide enduring extreme agony in the afterlife as a result. It is a tragic choice. Story 98. In my opinion, I honestly think my autism, specifically my routines or aversion to change, was a factor. I am almost certain that at least one of the medications I am taking has a negative interaction with alcohol. It was Cinco de Mayo, and I went to a local gas station. I reached the alcohol section, but I couldn't go any further because my mind was focused on the fact that I have spent almost 30 years not being an alcohol drinker, and I do not intend to start now. Story 99. As a teenager, a friend called while I was sick at home, so I knew someone cared. My pets need me. They might never find a home again if I die. Story 100. No truck or car made unexpected lane changes. Nobody came out of a driveway at the wrong place or time. Riders let the pain out before going for that ride. While it feels liberating to disconnect from pain, logic, life, and everything, it's not worth it. You have friends and family. There is no need to bring more pain into this world just because pain was brought into yours. Turn that on its head and respond to everyone with love. Story 101. I have felt distant for a long time, starting at a very young age of 12 or 13. This feeling didn't go away until last year after my 10th grade. I have been someone who listens to everybody's worries but never shared my own. I didn't have a trusted adult who could fully understand me. Every time my parents fought and I heard my name in that conversation, it made me feel like they would have been better off without me. However, things changed last year when I had a conversation with my mom. She told me, "You are the reason I am alive." I was really depressed at that time and wanted to end my life. My mental health was not good either, but then one day I went to the doctor and found out that I was pregnant with you for 3 months. All I ever hoped at that time was that you would be a healthy girl. This revelation not only gave me a reason to live, but also helped me understand my parents better. I decided to pursue a career in the medical field so I could save more lives. I am just a 16-year-old, but I want to tell everyone reading this that you came into this world for a reason, and you do matter. Story 102. My youngest brother. I knew if I left, he would experience all the same challenges I had, from the lack of support to the neglect. I couldn't leave with that thought. Story 103. Wanting to be there for my friends and family, I finally understand that I get to choose how I go out, and I do not want that to be the end of my story. I am learning that feelings are like hormones that we become addicted to, and we often feed ourselves narratives to sustain that addiction. Perspective matters, and medication helps balance things out in our systems. At the end of the day, say to yourself, write in your journal or include in your prayers, 3 things you are grateful for and why. Could be as simple as ketchup and fries, just to remind yourself that it's not all bad. I am grateful that I did not let the bad times stop me from experiencing the good times. My suffering allowed me to connect with my younger nieces and nephews, friends' kids, and others, helping them avoid self-harm. They now lead good lives, and we are close and bonded. I did not see a therapist until I was 35. That was too long. Do yourself a favor and find one. To live is to suffer. To survive is to find meaning in the suffering. Story 104. It might sound strange, but I am currently reading Oisumi Punpun. It is a very depressing manga that even addresses suicide. It somehow makes me feel that it's just not worth it. Story 105. Realizing that if I did, I would just be transferring my pain to my friends and family. It would likely cause someone else to take their own life as well. I try to be a moral person, so I decided to keep going another day, and then another. I still feel depressed, but I doubt I would take my own life unless the whole world literally falls apart. Even then, I believe I would find a way to keep going after having been through so much. Story 106. Sometimes my dog and I are very attached, even though she can be quite judgmental and has an air of constant disapproval. We are almost always together, and I often imagine her confusion and sadness at my sudden disappearance. Now that I am responsible for my younger brother, who has a disability, I feel that attachment even more. I would never abandon him. Story 107. It's kind of obvious, and it's brutal. Honestly, I tried to use a crossbow on my head, right between the eyes. It drifted off to the right side of my brain. Not only did I survive, but I'm still fully functional, aside from some nerve damage. So what stops me from trying again? Simple. I did die, but I came back. I honestly didn't think I could fully die at that point because, believe me, that was not my only attempt, just the most brutal. Well, if I couldn't die, then I decided to make the most of my life. The only reason I wanted to end things was because of how miserable I was, and a large part of that was due to my own decision-making. So I started making better choices. Granted, it took me a long time to figure out which choices were actually good, especially with all the brain damage, but I eventually started to figure it out. Now here I am, 11 years later on June 28th. I got through my second semester of college with grades good enough to receive multiple offers from honor societies. It's been kind of a pain researching them all to determine which ones are legitimate, but so far I've joined Phi Theta Kappa, which seemed very credible. I'm working as a baker at Einstein Brothers Bagels, and I made the cutest heart-shaped bagels on Mother's Day. They were so good that my boss took pictures of them with me to show off. What stops me now? Well, I won't lie. I still battle my depression and post-traumatic stress disorder, and I'm not sure if that will ever fully go away. I kind of doubt it, but it's become a lot more manageable. I really like who I am now, and I'm proud of how far I've come. Why throw it all away just because of one bad day or one bad week or even a bad year? I've shown myself that no matter what, I can always crawl my way back. So I'm not going to give up. I've come way too far to let that ever happen again. Story 108. Till this day, I don't know, but I am very happy I didn't. It happened 9 years ago. I was working on a cruise ship and fell in love with a girl from Germany and Kazakhstan. I thought she was everything I had ever wanted. I even asked her to be my wife on the Brooklyn Bridge in New York. She said yes, and I thought this was it. However, at one point, she showed her true self. She wasn't ready for marriage. She still wanted to live her life, be free, and experience the world. I took it hard when I went on a different ship than hers, and the heartache started. She was not answering my texts and became very cold. At one point, I couldn't take it. The ship was in the middle of the Atlantic. I went to the gym area and filled my pockets and backpack with weights. At 3 a.m., I was sitting on the ledge on deck 12. Even a gust of wind could have tipped me off into the cold water, but ironically, the weather was still and quiet. I felt like the ship had stopped and everything around me was frozen. Something pushed me from the inside, and I fell to the floor. Something snapped, and I went back to my cabin. Today, after 9 years, I am happily married and have a baby boy. It's the life I always wanted, and sometimes I reflect on how close I was to having none of this. Story 109. Being approved for medical assistance in dying in 2022, has extended my lifespan and given me confidence to go on longer than I would have otherwise, knowing the option is available. Story 110. I was going to do it around my sophomore year of high school. I posted my note on Snapchat, thinking nobody would care to read it, but an old friend did. They told the teachers at my school, and my principal said, "If you're gone, who's going to say hi to those people in the hallway?" I have lived by that sentence ever since. I learned that even the small things can make other people's day better. Story 111. I tried to harm myself and passed out for a while. When I woke up in my bathtub surrounded by blood, I was in a state of panic, so I did my best to clean it up. It was a terrifying experience, and I disliked having to recover. Since it didn't work the first time and reality hit hard, I am scared to try again. Story 112. Currently, the few people who care about me and whom I care about. Before that, there was a faint glimmer of hope. Sometimes I still think I should have jumped. Story 113. Fear, not of dying or being in pain, emerged as I recalled a song I had heard a little while before. What if you regret your choices in your final moments but can't turn back? I was on the verge of acting when that thought crossed my mind. I forgot the song's title as I had only listened to it once or twice, but it quite literally saved my life. Story 114. I'm worried I will make mistakes and end up feeling more disabled than I already do. I do not want to waste other people's time, and the most common issue around here seems to be a bridge that frequently leads to significant search and rescue operations. Story 115. First, the thought of leaving my husband to face life alone is a significant concern. When I find myself stuck in this line of thinking, much of my time is spent wondering if he would maintain his mental and physical health, whether he would have enough to eat, if he would choose healthy foods, where he would live, and if he would stay in touch with my family who have essentially adopted him as their own. The biggest question is whether he would be happy in the end. Second, there is a lack of convenience in finding a way to leave quickly and painlessly, with minimal impact on my loved ones. I do not want my husband or any other loved ones to find me lifeless. Story 116. Pranic healing classes influenced me into thinking that the soul would remain in the netherworld until its designated time, or we would face eternal damnation if we took our own lives. I believe in the concept of the soul. I cannot risk dying and then discovering that I am conscious as a ghost, forced to exist without a body for many years, or worse, being in hell permanently. Story 117. My cat. The week after she was fully off antidepressants, she knew it was her time and stopped fighting her own body. We kept each other alive. Rest in peace, sweet Olive. Story 118. After I took the pills and started feeling the effects, my cats began to freak out. Suddenly, the thought of leaving them alone and them not knowing where I went broke my heart, so I decided to get help. I tried to make myself vomit, and when that didn't work, I called emergency services. I was almost completely passed out by the time paramedics arrived. The anniversary was actually yesterday. Story 119. My dog has anxiety and an extreme fear of noises. She came out to the balcony where I was about to jump, with all the traffic noise, and positioned herself between me and a 3-story fall. Story 120. I was reading from a book, unplanned, and one of the chapters was different from the others. It was as if God flipped a switch, and I immediately felt an indescribable sense of perfection. This feeling lingered for a long time, and I did not even notice that it was gradually and gently fading into my previous reality. However, God also removed unhealthy ideas and distress that I had been struggling with. God loves us so perfectly that we cannot fully understand it. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.